Okay, so thank you for your participation and attendance today, everyone. I'm going to briefly introduce Nico here. Is one of our very own graduate students, and also a video game studies advocate, and also a game developer and video game activist, I would say as well. And I'll pass the stage over to Nico. You can make introductions.
Thank you so much, Ilya. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you so much for being with us also remotely. And thank you, everyone that will watch this video in the future too. Thank you for joining us in this special event in our Impactful Game series. Yesterday, we had a great event online with Rashid Al-Buaide from Palestine, with his game Layla and the Shadows of War. Soon we will publish that too, and this is the second event with my friend, colleague, a great creator that I admire deeply, from Argentina, from the Matajuegos cooperative, one of the few cooperatives of video game development cooperatives in Latin America. And they are the developers also of Atuel, this awesome game that we're going to know today. Pablo will talk a lot about this. That's a great thing. A lot about this project and how it was produced, how it was conceived, and the particular things of this project that blends documentary, testimony, ecological narratives, and climate change reflections through interactive media, and also the centering the position of the human and non, like tensioning with the human and non-human aspects through games. And also they're such a great ludic activist hub from Latin America and for the world. So I'm humbled to have them here with us. So please, an applause for Pablo. I'm going to just share with our remote friends just to let them know like how the space is being here. Say hi, everyone. Hey. So we have plenty of people here. That's awesome. We're happy to have you all here. And today, just to give a brief contextualization, we're going to show the game. We're going to play it. The game, it's about 15 minutes to 30, depends. We will see based on time if we are going to be able to finish it, but at least for you to have like the idea of the game. So then Pablo will share deeply with their presentation. But first, would you like to share something with all of us?
Thank you for being here. This is a lot of people. Thank you so much for making time for this presentation and for finding out a little bit more about Atuel and the work we do. Thank you so much, Nico, for your presentation, for having me, and thank you to the rest of the organizing staff. I'm very happy to be here and very delighted. So thanks again.
La definición de un río sí, te la van a decir, pero cauce que transporta agua. Pero no, es muy amplio. Creo que no sé, no me alcanzarían por ahí las palabras para definir lo que es un río. Pero un río es vida, es todo. Un río transporta vida. Sin agua, sin un río, grande, chico, como sea, es vida.
Para las comunidades originarias de la zona, el río tiene un propósito. El río tiene lo que las comunidades originarias le llaman ñem. Tiene como un espíritu. Tiene como un espíritu y muchos espíritus que lo habitan. Por eso cada vez que una comunidad originaria de la zona tiene que hacer algo con el río, tiene como costumbre pedirle permiso. A nosotros desde la civilización occidental como que nos sería gracioso pedirle permiso a un río, pedirle permiso a un cerro, pedirle permiso a un arroyo para pasar. Pero las comunidades originarias acostumbraron a que el agua tenía un sentido para ellos y entonces por lo tanto había que tratarla como un hermano más. Eso es decir, hermana agua, hermano fuego, hermano cerro, que ahora nosotros ya traducimos tan libremente, tiene que ver con esa cosmovisión que tenían las comunidades originarias, sentirse parte de los ríos.
Y el río, no sé, es parte de mi ADN. Llegué de muy chico y escuché en él las historias de mis abuelos, ¿no? Cuando todavía no había luz, cuando mi abuelo se sentaba a la orilla del fuego y nos contaba la historia del río, ¿no? De cómo llegaba, de cuando el río no tenía ninguna contención, de cuando el río era libre, nos contaba, ¿no? Que llegaba con el verano, con todo su caudal, trayendo noticias de la cordillera y nos dejaba en el invierno. Descansaba cuando era un río estival, ¿no? Esa es la historia que tengo de mi Atuel, que lo llevo en el alma, ¿no? Lo llevo a donde voy. A donde voy lo llevo en el alma. Sí.
Uno quizás analizando los sedimentos de la llanura, esas areniscas que va transportando ese material tan finito, es parte de la historia de la cordillera, ¿sí? Porque el río Atuel también se encargó de transportar la historia de la cordillera. Nosotros podemos interpretar, ¿sí?, analizando esos sedimentos, qué tipo de rocas atravesó nuestro río Atuel, ¿sí? Hablamos que nace en cordillera principal, donde el marco geológico es magnífico, donde hay rocas de todos los tipos, donde tenemos actividad volcánica, glaciares, presencia de mares. Quizás algún fósil logre sobrevivir todo el transporte que hizo esos 400 kilómetros del río Atuel y encontremos un fósil que es marino, que el río Atuel se encargó de transportarlo, y nos cuenta la historia de que la cordillera de los Andes en algún momento tuvo el mar.
La vida se forma al lado de los ríos. No hay ninguna población, ninguna, absolutamente ninguna, desde la historia de la humanidad que se haya desenvuelto en un lugar que no sea un río. El ser humano estamos como conectados con el río, somos parte del río, te da la vida, entonces como que te arrimás a vos mismo, es como un espejo.
Desde el naciente hasta que se embalsa, es el río naturalmente, ¿sí? Ya una vez que el río se embalsa y se desvía en los canales, acequias, en algunos brazos, o en nuestro caso marginales que tenemos, ya si bien sigue siendo de alguna forma un curso, o el agua que sigue un curso que el hombre le da. Es un impacto negativo. Todo ese agua que en su momento seguía su curso natural y servía para la flora nativa también, la desviamos, secamos parte de los humedales y quitamos el agua de esas zonas naturales. Entonces nos encontramos frente a dos problemas. El hombre viviendo en un oasis frente al agua, digamos, y a cómo debemos aprovechar ese agua que tenemos. ¿Sí? Y lo nativo, de alguna forma chocando con la mano del hombre. Ese sería, digamos, el principal problema ahí. ¿Cómo podemos hacer para que el impacto que generemos en la naturaleza sea de la menor medida posible?
Los puesteros del Atuel, gente de manos curtidas, hermanos de veranadas y de un río que da vida. Viviendo allá entre los cerros, entre cañadas y alturas, buscando para su crianza un real y buenas pasturas. Mujeres sacrificadas, hornos de pan, leña y tiempo, los sueños de una familia creciendo al calor del fuego. Las puesteras y puesteros que en el Atuel han nacido, quieren que siga nevando para que no muera el río. Su andar es una plegaria que se va llevando el tiempo, un susurro, una esperanza, hecha de arena y de viento.
Acá en el cañón también hemos tenido presencia marina del Atlántico. Aquí a través de la geología, a través de nuestro río Atuel, podemos hacer toda una interpretación gigante del marco y de todos esos terrenos que atravesó el río Atuel. Y lo curioso sobre todo es también lo variable. Uno cuando ve el cañón del Atuel, ve muchísimos colores, ve muchísimas variedades de tipos de rocas. Bueno, cada color de eso, cada tipo de roca nos muestra una historia geológica, un pequeño ladrillo de esa pared que se construyó a lo largo de toda la historia geológica del cañón del Atuel.
Y hay un autor muy precioso que se llama Galileo Vitali. Hace una comparación entre el río y la persona humana. Que el río es al comienzo alocado, así como si fuera un niño, que luego se va un poco enderezando cuando es un joven, que ya cuando llega adulto prácticamente vamos a decir, le ponen un dique de contención o le ponen un canal marginal y al final, el río, como el ser humano, se pierde, se diluye.
Parece que cada ser de este planeta o cada uno de los que estamos acá tiene como, no sé si una obligación, pero tiene como un mandato. El mandato de ser, el mandato de fluir. Ese mandato, el mandato de fluir, entiendo que es uno de los más importantes que tiene el agua. Entonces, el agua, el río, nunca se ha interpuesto en nuestro fluir. Todo lo contrario, desde hace 7000 años en la zona hasta la actualidad, ha estado acompañando el fluir de las comunidades humanas. Imagínate vos que desde que está la civilización hasta ahora, lo que hemos hecho nosotros a veces es no dejar que ese río fluya libremente, ¿no? Actualmente pienso en un río como otro ser más. Es un ente que tiene vida. Hasta hace un tiempo, cuando estaba como muy atravesado por las cuestiones técnicas y científicas, pensaba que el río era un curso de agua. Pero ahora, últimamente, estos últimos años, a partir del activismo en la defensa del agua, estoy sintiendo el río como un ser vivo más, como alguien más que siente, como alguien más que late y como alguien más que nos ha estado acompañando durante miles de años. Eso es innegable, ¿no?
Oof, I love this project. I love this game. Uh, I it's interesting on how all of you joined me on my particular playthrough, and I really encourage everyone to try it by yourself. It's a particular experience that the game and the ludic medium in general can give us and have to offer. So instead of analyzing this experience, let's just give this space to Pablo that will share with us many things about the production and the
Yes.
project. So
Can you all see me? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, everything good down in the back? Okay, before I begin, thank you so much for being here. I know looking at somebody else play a game sometimes isn't the most entertaining thing in the world, and when it's a slow, kind of meditative experience like Atuel and we have some frame rate issues, it's not always the most entertaining thing. So thank you for sticking through it. Thank you for being here, and for listening to what I'm going to have to say in a little bit. So before we begin, I'm going to introduce myself briefly. I'm the one on the left. That's Pablo Quarta. I'm a narrative designer and producer of video games. I've been working in games about 8 to 9 years. I've worn a lot of hats. I've also been a game designer, a content designer. I've done localization direction. I've done voice direction, working with actors. I've been a tester. And right now I also teach game design at a couple of universities in Buenos Aires in Argentina, which is where I'm from. And we developed this game, Atuel, in particular with Santiago Franzani, who I usually give this talk with. So today I'm alone and I'm missing him quite a lot. He's a very established audiovisual designer and indie game developer in Argentina. He's been doing this for maybe 14 years or so. And we're both part of Matajuegos, like Nico mentioned, which is an indie dev studio and game workers cooperative. Meaning it's a horizontal, democratic, and worker-owned company. And we've been working maybe since around 2016. We develop video games with strong political, social, and artistic perspectives that reference current-day Latin American socio-cultural issues generally. So, for example, Atuel is a game about global warming in Argentina, and about kind of historic environments and ecosystems. We also made this game together with Shisho, who was our expert QA tester, who did an incredible job breaking the game and then putting it back together and helping us polish it. And with the help of Macanucci Bento, who are a Romanian electronic music band duo, who contributed their music to our game to kind of create this ambient soundscape. And as you might have been able to tell, Atuel is a video game documentary, which is a strange thing to say. There aren't that many of them around. And it's a documentary about the Atuel River, which is a real river in Western Argentina. It's a river that's born in the Andes Mountains on the borders with Chile, and which then flows down across a great desert called the Cuyo Desert into the center of the country. We made it in collaboration with the 1201 Project, who are a group of documentarians who focus on stories about social change and land conservation. And the player experience for Atuel, as you might have been able to tell by looking at Nico play it, is mostly centered around 3 elements. The first is kind of exploring these dreamlike landscapes that are based on the real topography of the Atuel region. So you traverse mountains, canyons, valleys. There's one more, deserts, that's it. While you shapeshift, kind of inhabiting different perspectives of the ecosystems. We saw some animals, we saw condors, fishes, foxes, and parts of the water cycle like clouds, rain, and even the river itself. And the last thing you do is you kind of hear these different clips of testimonies of interviews with experts such as sociologists, historians, geologists, activists, poets, who all talk about the past, present, and future of the Atuel River Valley and kind of its conflicts with climate change. And these kind of come together to create kind of a poetic and meditative experience if everything works right. No. Atuel has been a game that's been very popular at festivals. It's done very well at festivals, in part because it has kind of this meditative and experimental game design, which is combined with its distinctive art style and kind of its treatment of pressing, global issues. We found that it works in a lot of different curatorial frameworks. That means that a lot of different curators are interested in having it at their events. It's a game that's been shown at experimental game festivals, as well as film and documentary festivals, or art galleries, or design museums. And thanks in part to the fact that it's traveled a lot, it's also been nominated for a lot of awards. In 2022, when it came out, it was nominated for Amaze Berlin's Most Amazing Game, and in that same year, it won Indicade's Innovation and Experience Design Award. And today I kind of want to talk about 6 pillars of design, of philosophy design, that emerged during the pre-production and during the development of the game, and kind of helped us steer it towards its final version. I'm going to take a sip of water. So. The first is that Atuel was a game that we wanted to make accessible to a larger Latin American audience. People who are not necessarily gamers, people who are very young and much older, perhaps, than people who usually play games nowadays. People who are not accustomed to playing games. And in order to do this, one of the first things we did was make it easy to play. Atuel is a game where most of the gameplay is simple movement. It has very few buttons, very few controls. You don't have control of the camera moves by itself. And we thought this would be the best approach to get people who don't play games to be able to sit down and finish the game and have a positive experience. And it also helps kind of emphasize the sentiment of flow that comes along with the subject matter, with the idea of you being and inhabiting a river. This constant forward motion current that pulls you through the game. The second is that it's a short experience. We played it in I think 20 minutes, more or less, a little less. And it's no longer than 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how you play. And this means that people who are not accustomed perhaps to sitting for 2 to 4 hours playing a game, who don't know to sit down and come back to a game, save it, close it, come back to it, and play it for hours and for days. People who are not used to that can sit down and have a short, impactful experience from beginning to end. And the third is that it's a free game. It's a game, in Latin America, depending on the country that you're a part of, navigating foreign digital distribution platforms like Steam, like the Epic Store, can be difficult for people who don't play games, who are not used to that environment. And sometimes even, depending on the region or the country, you may be limited in how you make digital purchases, the kind of credit cards that are available to you, or there may be issues with transferring your local currency to dollars in order to make purchases. So Atuel is a game that you just log on to a website, which is Itch.io, and you press a button and you download it. And it's as easy as it could possibly be, given the circumstances. And the last thing is that, right now we saw a build which only had English and Spanish available. But the game has been localized to 8 other languages, including Japanese and Chinese and several Romance languages, in order to, extend it beyond its original target demographic, which was a Latin American audience. The second pillar is that Atuel is a game that wants to highlight regional and hyperlocal identity. Atuel is a game about global issues like the climate crisis, like global warming, the growing scarcity of fresh water, but it doesn't treat any of these issues in global or abstract manners. It really centers on regional perspectives. It wants to situate these issues in a very specific location, and really wants to do kind of an investigative work in presenting to you the history of this place, the communities that live there, their thoughts. And this is done principally through the testimonies, through the interviews that you hear during the game, which are all spoken in the local language and in the local register. The Spanish that you hear isn't a neutral Spanish. It's not even neutral Argentine Spanish. It's very much a Spanish that is full of the idioms and the accents of the particular region that Atuel takes place in. And this is all to kind of highlight the personal connections that the people speaking have with the subject matter, with the specificity of these global issues in this very specific place, in this very punctual place, and how they deal with them within their own culture. You know, these are all people who, even though they're experts, they all live near the Atuel or have investigated the Atuel, and it's something very dear to them. And the object of this is kind of to represent these issues in a manner that is humane, that is human and real enough for players to empathize with and to get them to reflect on their own relationships with their local environments, the local ecosystems. You know, they're the fresh bodies of water that are kind of the source of their society. Even though we're, you know, in urban environments, we're very alienated from fresh water, and we don't really see rivers as the source of our ecosystem. This is kind of maybe the thoughts that would emerge from players playing this game. The last thing we do to kind of highlight regional identity is we did a lot of research in investigating native species, you know, plants and animals that live in the Atuel River Valley, and to represent them kind of in our minimalist 3D low poly style, because most working video games usually are references for plants and animals very much tend towards the global north, to species that exist in North America and Europe, and it's very rare to see them kind of iconized, to see South American species iconized. So we did a lot of work to kind of represent them in our game, and to also recreate iconic topography. You know, the landscapes that you see are real landscapes. We even include certain lakes that the river crosses, certain rock formations that exist. The third pillar is that we knew from the very beginning that, that for Atuel, we wanted the game, for the ecosystem to be the protagonist of the game. This is because part of the central message is that a river is not just a causeway of water, but it's a source of life. It's, you know, the heartbeat at the center of every ecosystem. And in order to kind of transmit this to the player, we had them inhabit different parts of the ecosystem. You know, the animals I mentioned, and the shape-shifting that occurs from one animal to the next is to kind of highlight the interconnections between these different parts of the ecosystem, to understand that the water that flows through each animal, that the river kind of flows through each of sorry, I'm gonna have a drink of water. I'm getting a little caught up. My mouth is a little dry. I'll be right back. Yes, the idea of shapeshifting between these different animals, these different perspectives, is to highlight the interconnections between the ecosystem, how the Atuel River kind of feeds all these different forms of life, and how they kind of interconnect. A fourth pillar that kind of emerged during development was, you know, Atuel is a fairly linear game. The gameplay isn't very complex. There aren't a lot of great challenges. There aren't big decisions that to be made. So in order to maintain the player's attention, we kind of have to break up that linearity. One of the things we do is change the illumination throughout the game. The light and the colors that you see in the game kind of represent a day cycle. They start, you know, right before dawn. They get you, then you see the morning, you see noon, you see the afternoon, and then you come back to dusk and to nighttime. And we very much wanted to kind of replicate the sensation, the feelings that you get in these landscapes as the light changes during the day, and kind of creates these very painterly landscapes. The other thing we do is we change the point of view. You know, since we have control of the camera, it's something that we can change a lot of the time to kind of give these very dynamic shots. Sometimes we bring it in very close to give these intimate moments where you're very close to fish, to the animals that you're inhabiting. And in other moments, we kind of pull it back to get these grand sweeping vistas. And we also do this kind of chronologically. You know, a lot of the vignettes and a lot of the testimony is going to skip around time. We have moments in which we talk about prehistory, about what the valley was like when the ocean used to be there and when prehistoric fish swam there. And then we switch over to, what the river was like 70 years ago when one of the narrator's grandparents used to live there and tell stories. And then we switch to the present, talking about the current conflict with climate change. The other thing that helps to break up the linearity and keep the pace kind of fresh and going is this changing of avatars. Even though the gameplay is simple, every animal and every avatar kind of controls slightly differently. Some of them have very unique mechanics, like the rain cloud can rain down on vegetation and on fires. The condor can dive down and fly up, and so on. And kind of breaking up and giving the player new ways to interact with the world helps maintain their attention and keep them freshly engaged. The fifth pillar is that from the very beginning, we knew that Atuel, we wanted to have a non-realistic approach to the documentary genre. This is because the game was made in collaboration with a film documentary about the same issue, about the Atuel. And the film documentary, which was developed by the 001 project, which we worked with, the documentarian team we worked with, had these grand sweeping vistas that were recorded with HD drone footage, had these very detailed close-ups of the interviews, and had kind of this very rational and linear expositive narration that was very much set in the present. And when we pitched our game to them, we told them that we wanted to do something that complemented that documentary by doing the complete opposite, by having this very surrealist and kind of emotional and interpretive approach. And we tend to think when we talk about the documentary genre, or whenever we want to talk about the real world through nonfiction, that we kind of have to do this through cinematic photorealism, because photorealism is somehow a neutral, unbiased visual mode. But this isn't true. Photorealism is a trap. It's a visual mode that's just as subjective and just as charged as any other. And it has its own interests at heart, and it plays a lot of tricks. The truth is that, we don't perceive the world like a camera perceives the world. Our own interiorities and our subjectivity kind of permeate through our own perception of the world and how we live in it. And surrealism and just stylized visual modes help us to portray that subjectivity, our own thoughts and our own experiences of life into our work. And beyond being more expressive, it's also a less expensive medium, working in video games. We tend to think of cinematic photorealism as kind of the epitome of what the video game can do because it looks realistic, it looks like a movie, it feels like a movie, it plays like a movie. But it's incredibly expensive. It requires huge teams of hundreds and hundreds of people working for years on end to produce a game. While working with something that's stylized, which is kind of low poly, like what we did in Atuel, is a lot cheaper and has a stronger sense of identity and is kind of more expressive. It allows us to express ourselves and put forward our own subjectivity and our own intentions into the work. It also allows for greater narrative potential. When you work in realism, everything that the narrative does in the game has to be plausible. It has to, it can't break the barrier of belief, When you work in something that's a lot more stylized, that breaks away from realism, you can suddenly have a lot more room to breathe in your narrative potential, in the things that can happen within the game and in the story of the game. Shape-shifting suddenly is a thing. Changing perspectives suddenly is something that doesn't break your immersion. For example, when there's a moment in the game in which you suddenly start swimming with prehistoric fish. And this was born from the testimony that the geologist gives about the prehistory of the Atuel River. In the documentary film, all you see is the geologist talking to you, because that's all that the present and that photorealism can really do with that testimony. in the game, we could transform that into the scene in which you're suddenly underneath the ocean, swimming with these fish, living in that moment. 4 minutes? Okay, we'll get through this last pillar then, and we'll close off. The last pillar is that, because we had this non-realistic approach, we chose a dreamlike aesthetic. And we thought of it kind of like as a dreamlike, an oniric mirror of reality. We often think that documentaries have to represent reality exactly as it is. But one of the things we wanted to do was start thinking about how reality can be different. Our perceptions of ecosystems, of natural ecosystems, living in cities, living in urban environments where we're very alienated and detached from them, are not the only ways to think about ecosystems. And some of the testimonies kind of get to that. We have testimonies from indigenous communities and how they thought about the land and the ecosystem. We have testimonies about what it was like, for example, to live on the Atuel River 70 years ago when the river was not dammed and the industry had not taken a hold of it the way it does. And surrealism, kind of this dreamlike aesthetic, allows us to inhabit these different perspectives for a little bit and hopefully get us to realize that the way we think about ecosystems is not the only way to think about it. Reality can change, can be different. And this dreamlike aesthetic is kind of tries to highlight that and make that more evident in a certain way. And we think that it's an honest illusion, as opposed to, kind of the false objectivity of photorealism. I think we think surrealism and stylized visuals help us be more honest about our subjectivity and our desires and what our message is. There's a few more slides about reception, but we'll close it off there since we have very little time, it seems like. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sitting.
Yeah, so the reception has been awesome, has been great. That's why also we are so grateful for having Pablo here in representation of the whole team. And I'm sorry just to skip that part, but we also want to open this space for you to do some questions if you have some online too. I don't know if Ilya, if you want
I was going to say, any questions from the room about the game development?
Yes, please.
So when you're talking about your pillars that inspired you to make the game, you also talked in the first pillar how you wanted to make it easy to play and like kind of for like someone that's not really in the game. So in a sense, did you kind of make it for a casual gamer, someone that would have the time for it and would like could have that 20 minutes or 30 minutes the game to get into like payment? So
Yeah, I think speaking of casual gamers is one way to kind of define the demographic. But we were also interested in people who just don't play games because even casual gamer is kind of a strange category because we'll say, okay, people play casually, but then you'll have someone. Sorry.
We learned about this.
We talked a lot about it.
Yeah. Okay.
We agree.
Okay. Then I won't get into it. But you have people who play Bejeweled for hours and hours and hours every day, and is that casual? I don't know.
Yeah.
This is mostly.
It's a key word. We did talk a lot about it.
Yeah.
They're real gamers too.
This is mostly meant for people who don't play games. And we mostly think of casual gamers as people who do play games. So maybe it's not for casual gamers, but it's also for casual gamers.
Yeah. If you have any question, please try to approach here so we can share.
Following up on that, it's also very interesting to see. One of the things I was going to talk about in the reception was kind of there's a rift of reception between people who expect games to kind of be very dynamic and very responsive to your input and to kind of be very clear about what they want you to do. And Atuel does not do that. Atuel is kind of this very mysterious, very strange game that is very slow and meditative and asks you to kind of match its rhythm. And there's gamers who immediately pull out of that, eject from that very quickly. And then there's gamers who kind of are drawn into that mystery and kind of find a new experience that they were not used to. And that's been very interesting to see. Please.
I had a question. One of the things that, especially this week, I tried to think about.
Can you approach a little?
Yeah, I can also repeat it. I can also repeat the question.
The question is, how can this this project, this game affect change, real change in the world? How do you see that happening? Because a lot of that we talk about in the gaming course here is games are often projected as a retreat from the real world and disconnected.
Sure.
And this is so much the opposite. So how does this affect change?
I'm gonna have so the question is how can Atuel affect change, or how can games affect change? How can they? And I don't think Atuel can affect change, which is kind of a negative answer. I know it's maybe a disappointing answer. I think Atuel is a game that drives reflection, drives thought, but it is not a game that calls to action. It doesn't say, in order to solve these problems, we should do this. We should march, we should get out there. We've made activist games at Matajuegos. We've made games that in support of marches, in support of certain causes. We've told people in those games, get out there, do this, do that. Atuel is kind of this interpretative work which asks you very much to pull these testimony, pull these images, pull these parts of the ecosystem together as you play and reflect on them and kind of interpret them however you will. It does try to create empathy, but empathy is not enough for action. That is what I've found as being an activist, being a game developer. A lot of times we feel good after playing empathy games. We're like, oh, we're so understanding. But that doesn't get us out the door. That doesn't get us into the streets. That doesn't get us to bother politicians. It doesn't get us to. So I think there's a very dangerous place in which we fall if we think, if we make a game about a subject matter and that is compelling and empathizing, then we're driving change. No, that's not enough. There needs to be more to that. And I think it's a dangerous place to fall because I've seen a lot of designers and a lot of both for games and movies and whatnot fall into that trap. And I think understanding and having empathy for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours is not enough to drive change. There needs to be more than that. And there's games that can do that. You can have games that are played at marches. There's, activist games that we can play at demonstrations to kind of, keep up goodwill while we're there, to keep us spirited, to, keep us coming, keep us engaged. And there's also games that can help us understand political systems, for example, and educate us in how to approach them as a certain thing. But I think a game needs to be specifically designed and thought in a smart way to do that.
And this is not that.
I just don't think any game can do that. It needs to be a game that's very well thought and kind of and designed to do that, which is hard. It's very difficult, I think. Yeah.
Any other questions from the room?
Also, if you have any question on the digital participation, just write it in Phil. 1 second, let me.
Oh yeah, sorry. I can write it if it's easier.
Should be okay now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Pablo. I really enjoyed the talk. I was just participating last week. I was judging an environmental game jam, and we were talking about how few games there are, especially commercial games, that feature the environment or ecosystem as protagonist, which is so fascinating. That was one of your pillars. And I found also the mechanics or verbs of your game really original, the raining and flowing of the river, that the players controlling that. And I just wondered if you could talk about any games or films or anything that you think have kinship with your work that approach subjects in a similar way. Or in particular, I was just thinking about the ecosystem as a protagonist because it's so relatively rare. Just a thought.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have anything to say about that.
Of course. I think there's
Just to be sure, were you able to hear Phil's question? Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay.
So I think there's two games that were kind of good references for Atuel. They were the only games that we really felt approached the subject matter the way we wanted to. One was Everything. I don't know if you know this game. It's a game in which you can play as just about any part of the world, as deer, as plants, and move. And it's kind of a very funny game in which there's a lot of testimony that you listen to while you play. And the other one was Flower, which was what's the name of the studio that does Flower? It's
That Game Company.
That Game Company, which came out before Journey. And it's a game in which you play as the wind, picking up flowers and plants. and kind of traversing different landscapes. And we felt that they kind of had a similar approach in how you manipulate and you move through the environment and kind of inhabit the ecosystem. I know there's a lot of other games in which you play as specific animals. I know Extinction, which came out last year, in which you play a fox kind of living through some kind of cataclysmic environmental disaster. I haven't played it, I don't know, but it feels like it's in conversation with our game as well, even though it's a lot more personified in a certain sense. I always want to say Katamari Damacy because it's a huge reference just in all my work. But it's mostly about inanimate objects as opposed to living ecosystems.
Yeah, I'm thinking about one. I forget the name. That you're an eagle. That was
Meagle?
an eagle.
An eagle. No.
Yeah, but there's a couple that were launched recently, so I can remember the name. Anyone knows any other title that will like be similar to that kind of game? No?
No.
Do you have any reference that you could share?
Not really. I would say the one game that came to mind is an art game from a Colombian American developer, Leo Castañeda. It's called Levels and Bosses. And I think it's still just a prototype on Steam, but it kind of melds protagonist and environment. But I think that your game does it in such a compelling way. And also just that the mechanics or the verbs that the player chooses from are so totally unique. And I can definitely see how it kind of is in dialogue with games like Flower. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Phil. We have.
Yeah, just a very open question. Could you tell us a little bit about how it is to collaborate in a cooperative to create games and what are the challenges, but also the opportunities of that kind of environment?
Okay, so the question is about what's it like to work in a co-op and what are kind of the challenges and opportunities? You didn't say opportunity, but I'm going to say opportunities.
I didn't.
I don't know. Maybe you did. The opportunity. So I find indie game development is cooperative by nature, which is kind of one of my great political stances in working a video game co-op, because it's a video game production. Let me see how I'm going to start to say this. So in order to create a video game, you need a lot of different people who come from very different disciplines, artists, programmers, level designers, writers, animators, to come together and each to contribute a part of their expertise to a greater whole, to a greater work that needs to speak with a single voice. And there needs to be a single experience for players. And you need to trust every single member to kind of pull their weight and do their part. And decisions are made by consensus, by discussion, by conversation. And it tends to be very horizontal in that way, because everyone has their expertise. And everyone's pulling together towards the same thing. It's kind of a model for a democratic and horizontal workplace in a certain sense. This starts getting a little warped once you get to very commercial spaces where teams are incredibly huge and you have CEOs and investors and decisions are made up top, and suddenly you have hundreds of workers, a lot of them working on the shader for a rock or one particular level, but have no vision of the whole. In indie development, because the teams are so small and the projects are so joint, so unified, everyone has this complete vision and shares it. This is how a cooperative works as well. Co-ops are worker-owned companies in which everybody has the same ownership of the company, has the same right to vote in decisions and to participate in decisions. And so we found when we needed to formalize Matajuegos, which is our co-op we started as a collective, we need to formalize into a company. We said, well, we already work kind of horizontally and democratically. This is how we make decisions through consensus, through dialogue. And a co-op is a way to protect that. Because if we were to incorporate as a regular company, suddenly one of us would be the owner, or a few of us would be owners, other people would not. Some people would get to make decisions, other people would not. And that's not how we work. The co-op allowed us to protect that system of organization and that system of work, and ensure that if anybody else joined our co-op, they would have those same rights as everybody else. The challenges, of course, are that democracy is hard. Democracy is very tough. It means people need to participate. They need to come in every day and engage and participate. And there needs to be a lot of transparency and a lot of dialogue in order to make decisions. Because otherwise you start falling back into these patterns in which it's just one person or a few people making decisions and everybody else kind of begrudgingly going along or not caring. And maintaining that communication open, maintaining their participation can be challenging, especially as, we're all worried about making a game. We're all worried about other things happening in our lives. Getting people to be there and to be present and reminding them to be present can be very difficult. Especially when, people maybe don't want to talk about the taxes that the co-op needs to pay. It's hard to get people engaged in that, but it's something that, as part of the co-op, it's everybody's responsibility. Even though some tasks can be delegated, you can have different teams doing different things. I think that's the most challenging thing, like in any democratic process or any horizontal process, just getting everybody engaged and participating. But I don't know if there was anything more about creation or development in particular that you were curious about.
It was a very open. If that's what you want to highlight, that's perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one more applause for Pablo, please. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here in person, online. Let me do it, just show like how many of us are here. Thank you so much. Say hi. Wait. I want also
50. We have this room until 1:50. So if you wanted to hang out, you can. I know you have places to be. You can go as well. Nico, you have an announcement?
Yeah, no, I want to thank also the College of Humanities, Arts and Social Science, or the CHAS faculty. I want to thank the Center for Ideas and Society of UC Riverside. I want to thank the Hispanic Studies Department and the Media and Cultural Studies Department and the GLAC the GLAC Foundation for the Arts at UCR. They've been supporting this event to bring all here, to have some food to share with all of us.
The food is outside.
To edit the video. And also this event was organized by Rio Junto. We have more activities going on, so please follow us on Instagram. We'll follow you back, rio.junto. And also it's supported by Ludocritica, a critical game research network in Latin America. So thank you so much for being here and hope to see you in our next event.
And while they're setting up the food, if it's not here yet, we do have the room. You can hang out. So
yeah,
feel free to use the space.
And thank you, everyone. Bye.